in the MMA, kickboxing, and Chinese martial arts world, you don't hear as much about the phenomenon of the Kiai. Right? In fact, it's a Japanese word that typically gets used in Japanese martial arts, and most especially karate, and of course all the karate derivatives, the Korean arts, Kempo variants, all that. But there are Chinese arts that use sound, although it's a little different. But the thing is that sometimes there comes down to a question of like, should you Kiai or not? And the funny part is, on the one side, like, there's actually evidence that it is helpful, and then on the other side, it may not be necessary at all. In fact, when I was competing in amateur MMA, we were told by the referees during the fighters meeting and everything, not to vocalize during the match, because that would be taken as a verbal tap, because it's too difficult to distinguish between cries of pain and shouts of battle. And I think to some degree that's valid, but that's also specific to the context of an amateur fight. They may say that in the pros, but I never went pro, so I don't know. And so when we look at it, right, on the one side, this idea of shouting or even just like grunting or whatever, right? And we see this in weightlifting and stuff all the time as well. So where it actually becomes useful is, so there's this thing called the Valsalva maneuver, right? And the Valsalva maneuver is basically where you hold breath and try to expel the air against the closed glottis. And it creates all this intra-abdominal pressure. And basically what that does is it can stabilize your trunk under heavy load, which makes it easier for you to lift things, because when you feel more stable, you can move more. So it's a second degree thing, right? It doesn't directly make you stronger. It makes you stronger by making you more stable. And some people have found that if they tightly expel air, like a hissing sound, sometimes that does better for them. That helps some people, especially female lifters, to keep the pelvic floor stable when they lift. Not all of them do it, and nothing's universal. And then for some people, they actually will shout. They will yell. In fact, I have had my own shouting and yelling in the gym. It just comes out. Sometimes you're just trying to grind through, and you need to get that little extra push, and it pushes you. Now, why would the shout or the expelling the air push you a little bit beyond just the intra-abdominal pressure? So now if we take this phenomenon, of course, you can see that, if you listen to some modern boxers and kickboxers, oftentimes you'll hear that and it does that same thing, because every time you expel and blow, right, it's you're tightening up your core, you're creating that stability within your trunk, which allows you to be a little bit more rigid on impact, which gives you a better mass transfer. Basic physics. And it would be the same thing with a shout or a yell. I don't have any research to distinguish between a shout and a hiss. But it seems to be operating more or less along the same principles. I can tell you for a fact as well, from a tactical standpoint and from a sports standpoint, holding your breath's not a good idea. So anything that allows you to breathe, in which hissing and yelling does allow you to expel air and promotes the transfer of air, is a good thing. When you exhale, you tend to calm yourself a little bit, and if you're exhaling, you're breathing, because breathing is part of the autonomic nervous system. So if you inhale, it's easy to subconsciously hold your breath. If you exhale, you will naturally inhale. It is very, very difficult to subconsciously hold your breath on an exhale. So there's plenty of good reasons to breathe, even if there's no voice there. And if you are not a fan of the Kiai, or if you're just in a quiet environment where you think that it would be inappropriate, then learning how to exhale with the same trunk activation can actually be super useful for you. I do not at all think that it is absolutely necessary. Some of the Some of the biggest lifts that I've done have had no sound, and some of the weaker lifts that I've done have had a lot of sound. It's not one of those things that is always necessary, always needed. I actually find that it's a little too much for me, like when I'm sparring and whatnot. And of course, we should mention, the common phenomenon that people talk about with it, which is, you can be disruptive. You can startle or frighten your opponent. That's up in the air, right? If they know they're fighting you, that may or may not do anything. Depends on how they respond. I mean, look, my wife and I were chased down by a dog in our neighborhood when we were out walking our dog, and getting big and yelling at the other dog chased it off. So, I mean, it can work. But a dog is not a fighter that is intentionally trying to fight with you. It's a different scenario entirely, and of course human brains are different than dog brains, so who knows. But the fact is that I don't necessarily buy into the idea in a sport fighting context that the shouting is going to be of too much benefit beyond just the trunk stability and forcing you to breathe. But in a street altercation where you may need to kind of, let's say you read the scenario where you're certain that you can't get out and you need to act. You don't have to wait for the other guy to hit you first. You don't have to wait to be attacked first. You just have to be able to articulate that he was a clear and present imminent danger that you needed to neutralize. And initiating with a shout can actually potentially do you some good in that scenario, but they're completely different scenarios. So, with the issue of to Kiai or not to Kiai, honestly, look, practice what you feel is right. Practice what you feel is appropriate for the setting you're in. If you are in a traditional martial arts school where they practice it, do it. If you are not in a traditional martial arts school where it is not practiced, it might be out of place. You might actually become a disruptive force in the gym and be harmful to the gym culture. So make sure that you're doing it in an appropriate environment. I will say, hanging out with the HEMA guys, some of the sword fighting guys will occasionally try to shout their way into it, and it never worked on me, and I didn't see it much work on anybody else either. So, again, context. So yeah, honestly, it's one of those things. It's up to you. Does it have some benefits? Yes. Does it do everything it's supposed to do? Yeah, I mean, context dependent, but sure. Is it necessary? Yeah, probably not. Plenty of people have fought plenty well without screaming their heads off. Just don't be like the people that are doing the extreme martial arts or the creative forms who are screaming like they're at an emo concert, because that's an embarrassment. All right, I will talk to you guys later. Good journey. Hey, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, do all the other social media stuff. You can check out our other socials, as well as take a look at some of the merchandise that we have for offer in the links below. And if you happen to be in the Phoenix metro area, stop in, come in for a class, come in just to say hi. We'd love to meet you. Until next time, good journey.